Hello and welcome to another episode of App Stories. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. We don't record this show ever on the same day twice. I don't think sometimes. Thursday is pretty common, but
we're flexible. We like to be flexible.
We're flexible. We're working around our summer schedules. But today we have a fun topic. And it's a topic that's been on my mind because I've been bouncing between different AI services for different things a lot. And the topic is I want to build a better AI app.
Build the ideal AI app. Yeah.
Right. And I want to talk to you about that. But the reason I want to talk to you about it in particular is that these services are not cheap. And, obviously, even if you're not spending the $200, $250 a month that some of them charge for the absolute highest tier, $20 a month for a pro tier, which is kind of, I would say, the standard for the next tier up from free, is still a lot if you're subscribing to 2, 3, 4 of these things. And so I want to kind of get this out there because this is, if a service or an app had these features, I think I would skinny down to just one of them. But right now, I still don't feel like I can skinny down to just one of them.
Yeah, and when you brought up this topic, I think the reason why I immediately said yes is that I think we can bring our unique app expertise. I mean, it's called App Stories after all. We take very much an app-centric approach to these services. Like these services, they tend to be made for people who live in a web browser and work in a browser and are fine with just using a website. And I mean, I use my web browser more than before and I use web services more than before, but I do love my apps. I love my apps on my home screen. I love my app integrations. I've always we've been through this kind of topic many times over the years. It used to be Mac automation, and then it was shortcuts and URL schemes. At the end of the day, I think for us, these services are a form of automation, right?
And
absolutely. I think we talked about this before. We don't use these AI services to generate images. Maybe we use them to search the web or to do research, but at the end of the day, we look at them as productivity tools. And our productivity tools, we just want to use apps. And the reason why I want to build a better AI app or the ideal AI app is that I feel this fragmentation in all these LLMs, and they each have a unique thing that makes it stand apart, but also it's not realistic to say, well, I'm going to spend $100 to have 4 AI services. If you're using the pro tier, if you want to use the max or whatever, ChatGPT is called Plus and they have Pro. Aside from the naming schemes that are confusing, but if you want to go one step above the standard paid plan, you're gonna spend $1,000 each month on AI services? That's not realistic. I mean, even if the most diehard AI people, I don't think they're gonna do that. And so this is our attempt at consolidation by dreaming up the ideal AI experience.
Yeah, your point about automation is a good one because my uses of these tools are primarily for creating things like scripts and also to manipulate text, not to write text, but to, alphabetize a list or take markdown formatting and turn it into some other format, stuff like that, like technical manipulation of text. And of course, very important, lots of research because these tools are all very good in their own way at coming up with citations. I mean, they make stuff up sometimes, but it can be a good first step in a lot of research projects. So
all right. So we have a laundry list.
We do. I just sat down last night because I spent a lot of this weekend. I spent a lot of Saturday working on some stuff with my wife who has a project and working with Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude all at once. And then Sunday, I spent part of the day integrating Todoist with my email, thanks to a project that you kicked off.
That's my fault. Yes.
with Shortwave. And so I was in a lot of these tools, and as I was using them, the limitations became, really noticeable very quickly.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go first. I'm going to pick something.
Okay.
I love the idea of scheduling tasks. I think this is something that ChatGPT and Perplexity both have. Now, it's kind of weird because like all of these companies, they're all kind of launching the same features, but they're called slightly different and they behave
Right.
slightly differently. So I'm just going to say that the idea of scheduling a prompt that runs with a date and time trigger, I like the idea, but I would personally love to have that feature in Claude. Claude doesn't have the ability to schedule any kind of task.
Nor does
And
Gemini.
nor does them. I think they promised it, or maybe it was somebody saw a reference to schedule tasks in Gemini. Gemini is kind of
Okay.
strange because Google promises a lot of things. I mean, that's what Google does at Google I/O. They show off.
Yes,
I'm
they
pretty sure
do.
Google promised MCP, and that's still not available.
Exactly.
We're going to talk about MCP later. But yeah, the idea of scheduling tasks, let me have that in Claude. I do love how Claude, can follow instructions and sort of the general style of Claude, the way that it responds to you, but it doesn't have a scheduling feature. And I'll go one step beyond that, and I will say, I want to be able to schedule. This is something that you can only do, I think, again, with ChatGPT at the moment.
Uh-huh.
I want to be able to schedule agents, whereby agents, ChatGPT, OpenAI, they literally have a feature called the ChatGPT agent. That is the
Yeah.
new operator mode. It is essentially a version of ChatGPT that can also use a virtual browser. It can use a virtual machine with a version of Google Chrome, and it can, browse the web and understand the web and do things that don't have an API, essentially. I want to have that everywhere. Like I want to have a version of Claude, for example, that can spin up a little virtual machine with maybe my logged in session for services that I trust with Claude, and say, well,
Yeah.
every Sunday at, 9 a.m. or something, launch the Claude agent and do this because I need you to check out a website that doesn't have an API, doesn't have MCP. And I want to do that on a schedule. So scheduling and agents on a schedule would be my first one.
Yeah, I agree. I think so. Scheduling too. I think there are a couple other aspects of this that the AI companies need to think about. I don't really like how it works in ChatGPT. I mean, I like that they have it, but I don't like how it's kind of hidden. There's you set it up. There's nothing in the sidebar that shows you that something's been scheduled. You can go to whatever your chat was or your project, and you can see in the chat history that you've scheduled something. This is a spot where I think, despite the fact that ChatGPT has a Mac app, I think a more app-like perspective might suit them better for things like notifications using that stuff. But be that as it may, the idea of agents I think is a good one. I have not been very impressed with ChatGPT's agent, and maybe that's because I gave it too big of a project. Let me explain what I asked it to do. First of all, Readwise Reader, they need to work on their API. Their API does not allow you to tag stuff. How can it be that API that they have doesn't have a feature for adding tags to existing stories?
Yeah.
I don't know. Because
I
what
think you can
to,
only tag when saving an article.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I wanted to go back to my existing database, and I wanted to have ChatGPT look at my articles and add two or three tags to every single one.
I know.
And it's a huge library, Tichi. And so I had it use an agent. And you know how long that was taking? That was taking like 5 minutes per article.
It takes forever. Yeah, it takes forever. Yeah.
So if you have 100 articles times 5 minutes each, that's just not feasible, really. So I gave up after like a dozen or so articles. After it worked for an hour or two, it was just that wasn't going to work. And it also had troubles with one of the things that Reader has is they have controls that don't show up until you hover over them, which that really screws up ChatGPT. And it didn't even attempt to figure out keyboard shortcuts. I had to tell it all the keyboard shortcuts, which sped it up a little bit, but still was problematic. So anyway,
the hovering trips up every agent. It trips up ChatGPT and it trips up Comet, the Perplexity browser. Same issues. Like I was trying to I was trying to do something with the Notion tab, and it couldn't, and it spent like 10 minutes arguing with itself, essentially, because it kept clicking.
Where'd the tab go?
It kept clicking on a note, and it was entering it was editing the text inside the cell, because it couldn't understand that if you hover on the right side of a cell in a spreadsheet in Notion, an open button appears on hover, and it basically kept fighting itself, saying, "But I don't understand. Why am I editing the text of the title?" I was like, "Oh, poor agent, you have no idea."
Well, and it's a real problem because that's a very popular way to design a web page in 2025. As you said, Notion is like that. Readwise Reader's like that. A shortwave email is like that. There are a lot of different tools.
Lots of hover.
Lots of hover stuff, which it's an interesting accessibility issue if the machine's having an issue with it. I got to imagine people have problems with it too at times.
Yeah.
But anyway, what I would like is, and this is just, I think, from my perspective, a matter of patience for these things to get better at running a browser, because right now, I don't know, I found the experience pretty frustrating.
Yeah, turns out all the AI companies are discovering that GUI-based automation is not great. And I mean,
it's funny. We're all here. We are back again at GUI automation.
Guess what? It's slow and unreliable.
It's never been good, and it never will be.
Since I am approaching these things as a version of automation, I am gonna pick the ability to run projects, right? A prompt in a project as a function of something else. Like in Claude, for example, I have a whole bunch of projects, so folders that have instructions. And, I have these different projects that do one thing. They're supposed to perform one task based on an instruction. And all of those chats that belong to that task go into the project. But sometimes I'm having a conversation with Claude outside of a project. And the output that I'm getting, I would like to say, "Hey, Claude, now take this output and use it as the input for one of your projects." Instead, what I'm having to do is I have to manually copy the output, go into my project, paste it, and run it from there. This is a classic automation project, running running subroutines, running functions. This is something that the workflow guys and
piping data from one function to another.
Piping data from, instead of having to duplicate your code, because that's essentially what you're doing by copying and pasting outputs in between chats. I would like to say, you already have this project. It already has instructions. Take whatever you just said and run it up against that project. So this is a feature that I would like to see everywhere.
Yeah, I'll take that one step further, which is I'd like to see those projects available in things like shortcuts, because the shortcuts functionality for something like ChatGPT is pretty basic, and it's mainly geared towards starting new conversations and new prompts. What I'd like is access to my projects, because, for instance, the other day I set one up that looks at Club Mac Stories website, looks at the AppStories website, and looks at the NPC YouTube channel, and just delivers back to me the next episode number, because you know what? I can never remember them. They're big numbers now. And so I just have a project. It does that. It takes about 45 seconds, and it gives me the numbers. And then I know for when I'm setting up the next week's episode what those numbers are, and I can paste them into like my daily note or whatever. And I would like an easier way to access those things outside of ChatGPT. Now, what I'll probably end up doing is using the terminal and using Simon Willison's LLM CLI, but I'm not sure if that's necessarily the best way to do it. I may end up, I don't know. I'll probably end up using his tool and then scripting it and putting that inside of the shortcut. But I would like an easier way to connect to projects.
Yeah. One of my favorite features in the LLM space was made by Perplexity, and that's their iOS voice assistant. It's a really clever feature in that they are taking advantage of native iOS frameworks, things like Music Kit and Event Kit, to give you access, or the Share Sheet, for example, to give you access to native iOS features like music playback or sending text as an email via the mail extension, or scheduling or retrieving calendar events and reminders. That's great. It's a really clever piece of software that they have put together, but it's only available via voice. And I don't understand why. It should be also available via text. There's no reason why this thing should only work if you're talking to Perplexity. And I'll go one step further. Why is Perplexity the only company that has done this? Now, I know what the most likely answer is going to be. That's because every AI company wants to lock you into their own little ecosystem. They want to maybe lock you into, setting a reminder for yourself in ChatGPT. But I mean, I think there's so much more that these companies could do when it comes, again, the app-centric approach, when it comes to taking better advantage of the platforms that they're releasing the LLMs onto. Why doesn't Claude have access to my reminders or my calendar events in the calendar system of iOS and iPadOS? Why does OpenAI only take advantage of Apple Maps for presenting locations instead of going, all in and integrating, with every single component of iOS that is available for free, right? Made by Apple, official APIs, official frameworks made by Apple. I hope that Perplexity continues to iterate on this idea. I hope that it becomes available via text interactions in addition to voice. But I would like to see this approach, like, let me integrate, whether it's iOS or Android, let me integrate more with the system, in all these other LLMs.
Yeah. I think that they should have the incentive to do this sort of thing, because if they don't do it, someone else will. I mean, there's no reason why a third-party developer can't take MusicKit, for instance, and build an AI tool that builds playlists for you. And what's nice about it, what's powerful about that, is that if you have an API connected to the AI, the API is the structure. It's what reduces the hallucinations. You put the requests, the prompts, into a structure that is known to work, the MusicKit API, and you spit out the results. And I think that if the likes of Anthropic and OpenAI don't do that stuff, that someone else will, and use their service to do it. So they ought to do it themselves.
Yeah, and also the argument that these companies won't do it because someday Apple is gonna Sherlock them with, in a potential future where Apple Intelligence is gonna work like that. I don't really buy it as an argument. If anything, I think it would be smart for them to do it now, because you would essentially sort of disintermediate Apple from the experience, right? Because if you're buying an iPhone, but then you download ChatGPT, and ChatGPT becomes your key to the experience, right? It's what you use for your Google searches. It's what you use for your answers. It's what you use maybe for scheduling your calendar, for scheduling your events. Yeah, you're giving Apple money for the hardware, but I guarantee that Apple won't love the idea that all of your software experience is going through somebody else, and it would create an advantage at some point for ChatGPT, for OpenAI to say, well, all the things that you're doing with ChatGPT now on your iPhone with iOS, that experience, you can actually get it on an OpenAI phone. 3 years from now, 4 years from now. So I think it would be smart for them to say, well, we're now having even deeper hooks into your mobile operating system.
Yeah. I am going to go with kind of a strength and a weakness of two of the major players here. And I'm going to say, I want ChatGPT's reliability, and I want Claude's instruction following, because Claude, over the weekend, Claude kept falling down for me.
Yeah.
And I'm at the point now, I was explaining to you before we started, I am having a problem with something, and I can't tell if it's a Claude problem or if it's an app problem. And I'm just waiting for a while to see if, it's a Claude thing that just resolves itself. And then, whereas, ChatGPT, pretty much always reliable. I mean, it has its downtimes, but you don't run into them the way you do with Claude. But the thing about Claude is, Federico, of all of these, it's my favorite, and it's my favorite because it seems to hallucinate less than ChatGPT to me. I like its style of writing. I like the UI of the app better. It just feels like a more pleasant experience from the perspective of someone trying to both research and write pretty simple code, which is what I'm doing most of the time. And it's hard to put your finger on, but it's partly the instruction following and it's partly the style. It's not like constantly flattering me the way Gemini does. Gemini is always telling me I've got great follow-up questions.
Yeah. Except that Claude loves to say you're absolutely right. Every single
that's
time
true.
you try
That's
to
true.
say, well, no, actually, you're absolutely right. And I think, I don't know if you saw, but Claude now has a Twitter account. And the first post that they had was, I think they said, like, you're absolutely right. At least they're owning the meme. But yeah, I agree. I also prefer the style of Claude over the others.
Yeah. If it wasn't that it was down so often, it would be something I would maybe even abandon ChatGPT for. But there are, as we said, other features that I still think are better on OpenAI's platform. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Factor. Summer often means having fun, but being busy. And when it comes to eating before heading out again, you might only have a couple of minutes to cook a meal. That's where Factor can help you out. You can eat smarter with tasty, chef-prepared meals that are dietitian approved and delivered right to your door. And now, with more than 65 weekly meals, you can pick what's right for you and have even more ways to fit in a real meal no matter where the day takes you. With Factor, you can enjoy variety and more meals. Choose from a wider selection of weekly meal options, including premium seafood choices like salmon and shrimp at no extra cost, and support your wellness goals too. Enjoy GLP-1 friendly meals and new Mediterranean diet options packed with protein and good for you fats. And you can savor those global flavors. For the first time, try Asian-inspired meals with bold flavors influenced by China, Thailand, and more. From more choices to better nutrition, 97% of customers say that Factor helped them live a healthier life. Feel the difference no matter what your routine. I think the thing I appreciate most about Factor is the convenience. I like to cook, but that doesn't mean I don't want to use Factor too, because some days I'm just incredibly busy. I don't have time. And instead of going out for takeout, which is oftentimes just plain unhealthy, I can grab a Factor meal and make that for my family instead. It's a lot better for you than takeout. And it tastes fantastic too. Eat smart at factormeals.com/appstories50off and use that code appstories50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. That's appstories50off at factormeals.com to get 50% off plus free shipping. Get delicious, ready-to-eat meals delivered by Factor. Our thanks to Factor for their support of the show. Should we talk about MCP?
Yeah, I want to talk about MCP. So my thing about MCP is that for something that is supposed to be so universal as a concept, it's really fragmented right now. At the same time, I feel like MCP is creating the sort of lock-in effect for me, in the sense that I am prioritizing apps and services that integrate with MCP over the ones that don't.
Yep.
That is why I think that one of my absolute new favorite features is the ability to have mobile MCP with Claude, again, on iOS and iPadOS. Anthropic is the only company that so far has enabled remote MCP. There's a conversation to be had about desktop extensions in a minute. But it's the only company that has done remote MCP connectors. So Zapier, Notion, Linear, Google, whatever, on mobile, in the mobile apps. That has been an incredible productivity tool. And it's allowed me to do things that if I were using like vanilla iOS with just iOS, Siri and Apple Intelligence, I wouldn't be able to do those things. For example, I was listening to Moving Mountains, one of my all-time favorite bands. They just put out a record after 13 years or something. Mm-hmm. And I was listening to the new songs, and then they also put out new versions of two popular songs from their debut album. And it got me wondering. I really loved the debut album by Moving Mountains from 2005 called Pneuma, but I got curious, like, what were at the time other bands that were sort of exploring the same space of like emo, post rock, kind of shoegaze, that kind of style.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked Claude these prompts, like, I love the original album by Moving Mountains. Can you go back in time and understand around that time, 20 years ago, 2005, what were other bands that were sort of doing the same thing and were sort of in the same space? And do that research, pick a couple of songs for each band, and then make a Spotify playlist for me. I kicked off that prompt, and after 20 minutes, it worked on its own. I closed the app, it worked in the background. It was Claude 4 Opus with extended reasoning, just working in the background, working with Zapier to do web searches, to do Spotify. And after even 10, 15 minutes, I had a playlist that was actually pretty great. It had the likes of like Appleseed Cast, for example, which is a band that I totally should check out again. But this is the idea, right? The idea of you think of something, and thanks to app integrations, thanks to this kind of automation, and thanks to natural language, you
Right.
can just create these things on your phone. And so the fact that MCP on iPhone and on the iPad continues to be exclusive to Claude, I don't know what these other companies are doing. Everybody's promising MCP support. OpenAI said they were going to do it. Perplexity says they're going to do remote MCP soon. Google said at Google I/O, oh, yes, we're going to do MCP in Gemini. But so far, it's just Anthropic that is actually
No.
doing it. And so,
and you're right. And things like Claude does a great job coming up with playlists. What's really frustrating is if you're using Apple Music and you can get your playlist, but you have no way to implement it except very manually.
Yeah, but that was also the reason why. I finally stopped using Superhuman, and I switched back to Shortwave because they rolled out extensive MCP support, so that I can take my existing Claude projects, translate them into Shortwave instructions, and I can have Shortwave save specific emails into my Todoist just by using MCP connectors and natural language. So that idea of MCP as a universal experience that sort of provides an escape hatch from the ecosystems of these companies, right? So that it can work with my music streaming service of choice, with my task manager of choice. I think it's a fantastic idea. And all these other companies, as a result, I find myself using Claude with all the problems of Claude that we've talked about in this episode, but it's the only one that enables that extra step of the experience.
And I think it's worth noting too that this is very different than Apple's approach with the shortcuts and app intents, right? Because what Apple's doing is it's the system that's getting the information from third-party apps. They cannot move the data from one app to another directly in the way that MCP allows. Because when you're doing your shortwave and Todoist thing, you're going directly into shortwave, you're running a prompt, and it's shooting those emails out to Todoist, automatically generating the tasks and the attachments and all that kind of stuff. It's really cool. That's what I was talking about before when I said I was implementing one of Federico's projects. And then I had problems because I think Claude fell over, but I got it working, and then it immediately broke because of, I think, Claude issues. So
is there anything else you want to mention?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I wanted to mention desktop extensions. So one side of the MCP narrative is the fact that so many of these tools, they are desktop only. Anthropic has sort of released a new standard. I think they're called like Claude desktop extensions or something like that. They're basically a new
connectors. Aren't they called Claude connectors?
Well, yeah, it's kind of weird, but they're all over the place. MCP is sort of like the umbrella term, and then they have remote connectors and desktop extensions. I kind of wonder if there would be a way for these desktop extensions that need to have like a Node.js server, they need desktop components to run. I wonder if maybe Anthropic could spin up some kind of like hosted desktop extension system where you can still use those desktop extensions even if you're not at your desktop. You follow
You
what
mean
I'm
like
saying?
connecting to a remote server to do the desktop part of it? Is
Yeah,
that what you're
yeah,
talking about?
yeah. That's what I wonder if
Yeah.
like, and I think there are some third-party galleries that let you do that, but I don't fully trust them, right? And I mean,
I bet you
obviously,
could.
like,
I bet you could use Tailscale.
oh my god, he just he
I just
cannot
had to
go.
throw it in
He
there.
cannot go a single episode without mentioning Tailscale.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Anyway,
anyway, yeah,
no, that's a good one. Let me just mention a couple other things. I do want to touch on Gemini a little bit more because one of the reasons I subscribed to Gemini's Pro plan was that I wanted to use NotebookLM more than anything else. But Gemini comes along with that, and Gemini is pretty good. The thing that's really nice about Gemini is it has a very big context window. So if you have a big job, Gemini is the way to do it. What I don't like about Gemini is the fact that it always wants to give you like a 20-page report, even when you ask for a list. It'll be like, here's 20 pages about your list, and then the list drives me a little bananas. So that's Gemini. But the last thing I want to mention is that I wish that these tools just had an option to pick the best thing to use for the question you're asking, because sometimes I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, I want it to be right, but if I use Opus, I'm going to burn through my allotment very quickly. Do I want to use the web or deep research? How are those things different? Doesn't deep research use the web? And then extended thinking compared to using the web. All the different terminology, which is different from company to company, and all the different features, which are slightly different and sometimes I think overlapping a little bit, makes it a little hard to pick sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I think that's it for my list of. So, I think we've built a pretty good LLM. I think with these features, we'll see. And obviously, like, there's a good chance that by the time this episode comes out, things will have already changed, and maybe some of these features will be available in a week. That's just how things go in this space right now.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Federico, do you have time for a mini topic?
Yes.
All right. I want to talk about read later apps because I recently reviewed Folio, and I gave Folio good marks on the foundations and not so great marks on some of the things, some of the features. It's a good start, and I mean I give them a lot of credit because it's led by someone who worked on Pocket. Pocket shut down. They built this app. They seem to have done it very quickly. So they're still working on it. It's improving quickly. The parsing's really good. I found that it stripped out a lot of images. I've been in contact with them a little bit, giving them a little bit of feedback. But one of the things that it didn't do, which drives me crazy across all of the read later apps, is it doesn't have any kind of shortcut support. There's actually no way to get your data out of it at all. Now, most of these companies do allow you to get the URLs out as like a CSV file typically. And that's good for like if you want to move from service to service. But what I really want, and I want to get your take on this from a shortcuts perspective, and maybe I recognize this is kind of a narrow use case probably, but what I really want is the ability to get out data about the articles too, because obviously a read later app knows things like the title and the author and the publication date and the body text. They know all of these things, which are all part of what they're scraping off of the website. I would like to see read later apps take a page out of the GoodLinks book and allow for you not only to find individual articles with keyword searches and so forth, but also let you get out individual bits of metadata from those articles, so that maybe what I want to do is say, I want to take all of my articles tagged shortcuts and I want to run them over to OpenAI, to ChatGPT, and create myself a little summary so I can look it over and decide which of the articles I want to read and which I want to discard. Those kinds of taking something from one place and taking it to another for another function that I don't think any read later app really does very well.
Yeah. I don't disagree. I also fear that a lot of these companies maybe don't want to do it because, again, it's that idea of the lock-in. It's a lock-in. Like, we're going to make it hard for you to leave our service and it creates a tiny bit of friction. Like, and maybe from their perspective, like, why would you ever want to leave? Like, our product is great. You don't need export features. And
Yeah.
I think something as powerful as GoodLinks, I mean, I would love to have those kinds of actions and automations in Readwise Reader, for example. I don't think they're gonna do it, and I don't like it, because I think in an ideal scenario I should have complete freedom over importing, exporting, like make it as portable as possible, you know. But it's just not the case, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, and I think one of the fundamental problems that read later apps have is they view themselves too much as a read later app and not as much as a storage solution for web content.
Yeah,
And if they looked at themselves more as a storage, like a bookmarking service, for instance, because they have all that metadata, and if you've already had the intention to save that information, there's a lot more value there than just opening the app and being able to read the body text in a nice format. That's great, but sometimes you want to use it for something else as well.
yeah. Well, I think that's it for the main episode, John.
I think it is. In the post show, I want to talk to you about our good friend Todoist and a long list. Well, maybe not a long list, a list of ways I think that it could be improved too. We're rebuilding Read Later apps, AI apps, and Todoist all in one episode.
All right.
Well, that's it for this episode, folks. Thanks again for listening and watching on YouTube. You can find me and Federico over at macstories.net, and we're on social media where Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI, and I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.